Yo, BJ Gaddour with the Get Some Gains podcast, and my special guest today is Erik Rokisky. He is the inventor, creator of the Squat Wedgiez. Slantboard training is it's taken over the internet over the last couple of years, pretty much since the pandemic. And a lot of people have been looking for various tools with which to elevate their heels, or, when we'll talk about this today, there's so many applications for these wedges or slant boards. They've been around forever in physical therapy, but now they're coming more to the mainstream with fitness. And this is the best product I've seen out there for slant board training, Squat Wedgiez. And we'll talk about where to get them and everything throughout the episode. But I have the creator here today to talk about, we're going to go through his intro, origin story. We're going to talk about the benefits of slant board training. A lot of people have no idea why you would do it. People think it's just for rehab exercises. Erik will share his favorite slant board exercises. We'll talk about his unique product and why he created it and the differences between other slant boards out there. And then we'll finish it off with, where you can kind of learn more about this, Erik, and everything else. So it should be a great episode. Erik, welcome to the show. And tell us about your background and how you got into fitness in general.
Thanks for having me, BJ. Super excited to be here to talk about the benefits of having a wedgie. When it comes to my background, I've been in the business for a while now, actually. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm approaching 30 next month. And I became a trainer at 19, so a little bit over 10 years now as a personal trainer. Started out going to school, East Carolina University, got my exercise science degree. From there, moved out to Los Angeles to be an intern at Equinox in downtown Los Angeles. I worked at Equinox for 4 years. And in that time frame was when the wedgie idea was born a little bit. We made the first prototype way back in 2015. We made it out of wood, just some wooden wedges, and then just kind of pushed it away, didn't think anything of it. And then later on, maybe like in my third year in Los Angeles when I was at Equinox, I was with one of my clients and we were using our wooden prototypes using the wedges, because you've been in the field for a long time. Like, wedges have been around for a while. We've always used them to elevate the heels, to make squatting a little bit easier, especially for the Gen Pop clientele whose ankles are super tight. Put a little wedge under there, makes it easier to squat deeper. So I used it with one of my clients, and we were talking about it, like potentially turning it into something. And at the time, I would call it the power wedge. And you hear that name, and it's not marketable whatsoever. So then she responded back and she told me, she's like, what about wedgies? And once I heard that name, I was like, oh, wedgies, like that sounds great. That's actually fun. I think you can build something around that, actually. And it started spinning ideas in my head. And then I started looking at the actual marketplace of everything. And I was like, man, wedges are really expensive these days. I was like, I built these out of wood. I can't do that at a mass scale for people. But even out of rubber, it was like $70 for a wedge. So I didn't know what to do yet still, because when you're starting out to build something, you really don't know where to go. So time continued to pass a little bit more. And then approaching like my fourth year at Equinox, this was 2019. I've been there for a long time. I've rose to the ranks, started as like that intern and got up to the tier 3+ level, which is like the highest training level at Equinox. So I felt like I kind of reached my ceiling there and I was ready to go on to do my own thing. So I planned to exit Equinox and start my own personal training company. I left Equinox in 2020 of January. So about 2 months right before the pandemic. So I left Equinox 2 months right before the pandemic happened. I had some clientele ready for me that was training in my apartment complex because we had a really nice gym there. So I had an exit plan and strategy set up. And then the pandemic happened. And, as a trainer, like, everything shut down. Gyms, my apartment gym shut down. So I had a lot of free time on my hands. And that's when I started to think about like the wedgies idea again. I was like, maybe we can turn this into something. Maybe we can build something out of this, but I wasn't ready to go all in and just take everything I had and just start building it. So I was like, let's start out with a Kickstarter first. And that's kind of where we started to get the ball rolling. We launched the Kickstarter in 2021 of May. And we got it fully funded. Our goal was to raise 10,000. We raised about 14,500 around there.
Nice.
And that's kind of what launched the product. And here we are today. I actually have the first prototype. Let me grab it real quick.
And the benefit, we do both a video and audio podcast. You can actually see the product on the video, those watching on YouTube, but check it out. This is an exclusive.
Yeah, so this was our first one. The first idea was to make them stackable. So our first idea was, let's make our plastic wedges stackable, super compact, and go right on top of one another. These were 3D printed. So these were what we used in the Kickstarter to kind of show people the uses of them and how you could use them and the benefits. But what we found out was that when we actually got the product, when it was made out of plastic, it would just kind of splay out a little bit. So we had to go back to the drawing board and to put internal ribs to hold it all together. And now it's super strong. Now you can drive a car over it and it's perfectly fine. But, you know, nothing like building a product and facing a little adversity along the way. So now we do have, we have our plastic wedges from our Kickstarter, which is called our travel wedgies. But we also have our XL foam wedges, which for the video, for the audio people, you can't see it, but I also have our XL foam ones here. And then we also have our rubber wedges as well. So we do have an increased product line now. And that's kind of been the creation of it from a Kickstarter to now a fully functioning brand, which I'm really excited for.
Dude, man. Well, you know, first of all, a couple things to unpack there. Number one, I don't have a gym membership. You know, I'm kind of this fitness hermit who trains at home exclusively. But if I was to get a gym membership, it probably would be at Equinox. Those are super high-end facilities. They have like, it's almost like a Turkish bath. They have like,
they got everything.
Oh man, like cold plunge, sauna. Anyway, so that was a great place for you to get your start. Great equipment there. But one thing I talked about when the pandemic hit March 2020 is that you know, I kind of foresaw it as either a 2-year prison sentence or training camp. You know, a lot of people shut down and did nothing. And, you know, some people needed it. They needed to kind of, first time in their life where they could like work on themselves or spend more time with family and friends. But people like you and I, entrepreneurs, you know, we had to take advantage of the opportunities that we saw, right? And opportunities to pivot. And the fitness industry has been decimated from the pandemic. A lot of people that are still around found a way to make income online, to stay in the game. We're already doing online stuff. So I congratulate you for, you know, that proactive, you know, control what you can, do the best you can, what we're working with. And you made some great things happen in the 2-year block. Like you could either get ahead during the pandemic or fall forever behind. So I'm glad that you were the former, not the latter. And I have the products here as well. And I've been using them in my videos too. And I'm a big fan. I've tried the wooden slant boards. You know, those are expensive. Those are bulky. What I love the most about your wedges, especially the big one, I can get my whole foot on it. It's got grip tape that you can add to it for extra traction. I really like the amount of elevation. The degree of elevation is, I think, perfect for most of the movements. And you get 2 of them. So you can do single leg stuff. And then you can also change the spacing if you're doing double leg stuff. And this is super high density foam. So, and you have another one too that is still has grip tape, made out of plastic with some really good reinforcement, but not as much of an angle, right? It's less of an inclination.
So both products are actually at the same degree slope. They're at that 15-degree slope still. It's just that one's way smaller in length. So it just looks different. So like one is 13 inches in length. And so the XL wedgie is 13 inches in length, right? And we built that one for people with larger feet who are athletes. And then also some people like the feel of foam on their feet too, versus like the hard plastic. So that was more like that PT route as well. And then like our first wedge we built, like the one you're holding, the plastic one, that's our travel wedgie. That one was really built though. That was, like I said, our product from the Kickstarter. We built that one because we wanted to make something as affordable as possible. And we sell that one for $29.99. I mean, to get a wedge under $30 that is lightweight and durable, it's extremely hard to do. Even rubber is going to be around still like 2 to 4 pounds of weight. Like that one weighs under a pound. So we built out a plastic to to hit those requirements of keeping it affordable, keeping it durable, and keeping it lightweight. So for me as a trainer, I travel to some of my clients' houses. You know, I wanted something I could just throw in my backpack and bring with me. I mean, you can still do that with the XLs, but it is a little bit longer. And for some people, it takes up a little bit more size. So that's why we kind of kept the plastics at that like 9-inch mark. And then on top of it too, is when it comes to making like that type of wedge, is we make it out of a mold first. So making a mold 13 inches long is extremely expensive, especially out of plastic. So it just wasn't feasible to still hit that requirement of keeping it affordable. And that was the main goal. It's like, we got to keep these affordable, because if I'm just going to sell it for $70, like that's already on the market. What's the point of even jumping in here just to jump in here? So I was like, let's keep this for affordable, cheap, super lightweight to keep shipping down. So I feel like we've done a good job with that. And then, yeah, they're all 15 degrees. And the reason we chose 15 degrees, because when you kind of look at some of the research, a lot of the studies do suggest like that 15-degree slope pretty much covers all basics for most people. Like most people don't need more than 15 degrees. There are 20-degree wedges out there. And, you know, to put it simply, it's like the greater the heel elevation, the more upright your torso is going to stay. So, and the greater the knees is probably going to travel forward. So if you find that 15 degrees isn't enough, all I tell people to do is like, just put a pair of shoes on that have a wedge. Like, so that was the other reason too. It's like, a lot of people are going to train in their shoes too. I mean, I train barefoot, like wear like Vivo barefoots, right? So like, I don't have a heel to my shoe, but most people usually have a heel to their shoe. So I didn't want to build a 20-degree wedge and then people wearing shoes, because I think there is a limitation almost. Like, I don't think you want to go above 20 degrees for most people, because then I really think you're starting to overload that heel elevation a little too much. So that was kind of the goal. It's like, let's put it to 15 degrees. And if people put a shoe on, it's probably going to get closer to 20 degrees. But also, which I love the XL wedges, is because, and for people on audio, I'm just showing the benefits of a longer wedge. It's like you have 15 degrees at the top here, at the top of the wedge, but then you can walk all the way down and kind of choose you can choose your dose a little bit. Like if you want 5 degrees, just elevate your heel just a little bit, just to give you a little bit of taste of it. So I felt like that was a huge benefit for it. But I don't think people need more than 15 degrees on average. Like, because I feel like I've seen some of your posts where we talk about the knees over toes stuff. And the one thing about a wedge is it is going to load the thighs more. It is going to load the knee joint more. And with anything in life, like you always have to be careful anytime you're loading something more for the first time, because if you overdo it, the knees can just take too much. And that's how soreness and injury can occur. So it has to be very subtle when you're using these products.
No, I mean, that's actually brilliant add-on. I didn't even think about the fact of putting the heel closer towards the lower end point to kind of progress to lower inclinations. Because again, like I believe that heels elevated or slant board training is a category of exercise. It has been for a while. It should be. I think it has so many applications. I'll be shooting soon like my top 10 slant board exercises video for YouTube. But I wanted to first get you on as the creator of this and someone who spent a lot of time digging into it. But the goal is this doesn't replace stuff you do on the floor, right? There's a lot of people don't have the ankle mobility or what's called dorsiflexion to flex at the ankle enough to squat deep and tall with good form. So what this allows you to do by elevating the heel, we can get more range of motion through the hip and the knee, but we still want to work on our ankle mobility, right? If anything, this kind of feeds the ability to get you doing things on the floor through better form, more range of motion. Or if you want to, a lot of times in my training right now, we're actually working a single leg squat progression as part of our Grillicorn Gains programming to finish off the year. And I'll do like the first 3 sets on each side, foot flat, and then I'll do the final 2 sets on the slant board. And this just keeps exposing my knee and hip to the ranges of motion I hope to get eventually on the floor. It's also really good at what's so important too. There's 2 things, like you got VMO. VMO is so important for knee health and stability. It's the first muscle that shuts down when the knee gets injured, when there's swelling. And also your brain, if you're not used to getting your knee that forward or getting that low on a squat, your brain will kind of shut you down to prevent injury. So it's getting your body ready for those positions. So I feel like it's an essential training tool. And again, what you've done so well with this is one of the few ones I've seen where you actually get your full foot on it, unless you're like Shaq.
Yeah.
You got to make a custom shack slant board. I wonder if he's interested. But and again, like it was one of the most affordable options with the portability and everything else. So kudos to you on that. Let's talk about the benefits of slant board training. Like, it isn't just for squatting, but that's the first thing people think of. Like, oh, it's the way I can get ass to grass. Is it just for beginners? What's your thought process on that?
So when it comes to like the benefits of slant board training, like obviously the biggest one is like it improves your squat depth right away. I mean, you don't even have to talk to it and be like, hey, watch this. Just go stand on this and squat. And then you'll see like the eyes get wide and they're like, oh, that feels really good. Because we do a lot of the fit expos. Like we've done the expo in San Diego and the one in Los Angeles. And we have people come up and just try them and do like a squat challenge. And every single person just says the same thing. Like it makes squatting so much easier. And like you said, it's because by elevating the heel, you're pretty much blocking the back. So you have more space to go forward. But there's also more to it as well that I think sometimes a lot of people don't talk about. And I've learned this from some of my mentors in the industry, of some like Bill Hartman, Zach Couples, kind of more on the PT side of things. But the idea is that like when you do elevate the foot, it pretty much just sets the whole system, like the pelvis, the legs, in a better position to allow you to keep a more vertical displacement of your body. Because when we look at a true squat, it is about staying nice and upright, squatting kind of straight down and having the knees go forward over the toes, which in the past, so many people thought it was just about getting your hips back and not letting your knees go over the toes. So I think that's kind of why a lot of people weren't using wedges, because they were just afraid of that knees over toes movement. But now we know it's kind of essential to squat properly. You have to have the knees over the toes. So the main benefit is it makes your squat look more like a squat. If you're somebody who is, 6'3" or something and you have really long femurs, you're just not going to be able to squat properly without a wedge because your femurs are so long. I mean, squatting isn't like squatting with a barbell on your back is not a natural movement. And so many times when we do like a post on Instagram or something, people are always like, just work on your ankle mobility or just squat barefoot. And it's like, not everybody has the same bone length. Not everybody has the same hip structure. So for some people, the wedge is essential in allowing them to hit that proper depth. So the main benefit is improving your squat depth. And on the same page of that is like improving your squat depth with a narrow stance. So a lot of times when they squat, in order for them to hit depth, they're going to get a super wide stance. And when you kind of look at the research of squatting, it's like, the wider your stance goes out, the more you're training your inner thighs. So the more you train those groin muscles. So by squatting with that nice narrow hip distance stance, it allows us to really load up the thighs and the glutes. And that's kind of like a thing that I really like to hit home at. I'm like, yeah, you can squat to depth, but look how wide your stance is. I'd much rather someone get some heel elevation, get those feet right under their hips, and go to a proper depth there so we can really load those thighs and the glutes. So that's probably the main benefit I see with it. And then when we're talking about additional benefits of slant board training, I mean, toes elevated work is good too. I like using the toes elevated work for teaching proper hip hinging. It can really help feed that pattern backwards. And for people who wear a high heeled shoe, I think this is a little bit of a rant, but it's like when you train people in real life, not every single person is going to walk into the gym and be like, I want to take my shoes off right away. Some people just don't want to take their shoes off. So if you have someone who has a high-heeled shoe on, just putting that wedge under the foot to elevate the toes can kind of cancel it out. So it's more of like a flat shoe now, and then it makes it a little bit easier to hinge backwards. So we like to use heel elevated work for squats, and then we like to either be flat on the ground or toes elevated for deadlifts, just because it helps teach that proper hip hinge. So I like using it for the hip hinge work. And to stay with the toes elevated stuff, I mean, increases range of motion for calf raises, calf stretching as well, especially with the XL wedge. I definitely feel the XL wedge is a better choice for doing calf work because that's where you can get that elevate that whole foot up and really get the feel of the foot rolling up and rolling down. So calf work. And then have you ever used it yet for single leg hip thrusts or like hip thrust work yet?
Oh man, I was actually just going to say so doing it for either hip thrust, one or two leg is with the high side on the far end. It actually really, so you get both a up and a pushback angle.
Yeah, exactly.
And it really engages the big toe more.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually, because again, like you said, sometimes you want to bias the heel, sometimes you want to bias more of the forefoot based on what you're trying to train. Heel will get you a little more posterior chain. Going more forefoot side might get you a little more knee dominance. But and again, like it's not just elevating; it's also just a unique training angle. That's what people I think overlook too, is that like sprinters coming out of a block, they have those things at the starts they put their feet in because that angle allows for maximum propulsion. And it gives you, like, you could squat on your toes, try to balance in on your toes, but that can be too unstable, which can create pain and other things. So I think what you touched on was great. Like, this is something that you can immediately use as kind of a hack for beginners, taller athletes, people with really bad ankle mobility. And what people don't realize too, like, I've been working on my ankle mobility for 2 decades.
Yeah,
right? Like I try to squeeze out like a millimeter of range of motion at a time, and it takes a long time. I'm 6'2", I've got longer thighs as well. So squatting, like you said, a lot of us get forced into this kind of power lifter squat, really wide sumo stance, toes out. It doesn't really apply to activities. You can't really do things with a wide stance. So, and then there's the classic bodybuilder style squat where they go feet hip width or narrower. And, Arnold, there's videos and pictures of him in the archives with, 4x4s or boards under his heels so he could get that because he was also 6'2". So I guess what we're getting at here is it's going to allow you to make squatting accessible for all fitness levels. It's better for closer stances. It's better for more low quad stress. And it's a way to feed the system some good training as you work towards eventually doing more things on the floor. Just, always have the ability to kind of bounce between the two. But no, I love them for single leg hip thrust and the hip hinge, man. Like it puts your calf in an automatic ankle and an automatic stretch. And I really find that it helps me push the head of the femur back into the capsule when I hinge back. And I showed those on Instagram as well recently. And so, yeah, I mean, the ankle stretching, and I've even seen you do like some upper body drills, L-sit, stuff like that with them too. I mean, there really are tons of applications.
Yeah, well, like that kind of goes into the next benefit is when you look at the ankle and you look at the wrist, they're pretty similar when it comes to like their structure and limitations. I mean, a lot of people have ankle mobility restrictions. A lot of people have wrist mobility restrictions. So if your wrist is limited, just elevate the wrist, right, when you're doing push-ups. So a lot of my clients
watching that would mean do your push-ups like that.
So we'll go. So like this, yeah, just like your foot, yeah, exactly. I mean, I've seen people.
I'm getting messed up looking at myself in the camera here.
I've seen people do it like toes going up the ramp, but I don't like to like tout on things I don't really know much about. I'm like, all right, there might be a benefit. I'm not sure though, but I know there's a huge benefit to elevating the wrist. And the cool thing is, and this is where I like the XLs a little bit more than the travel ones. So the travel ones, their elevation is only 2.5 inches and about 9 inches long. And that's why like it has the same slope because these are 3.7 inches tall and 13 inches long. So I like this for push-ups because you get that increased depth now too. So now you have an extra 3.7 inches of range of motion you could potentially go into when you're doing that push-up, right? So by elevating that wrist, it just gives your wrist more space so that you're not putting as much stress on it. So we've been using that a ton and we're seeing great success with that. And then I think like another thing, what you talked about earlier was the ability to elevate the whole foot. I do think elevating the whole foot when using a wedge is ideal. It's not the end of the world if you do want to just like walk down the wedge and only elevate your foot a little bit. The most important thing is what you're looking for is you don't want to jam your toes into massive extension. So it's hard to show right now with obviously, but if I had my hand here, right, and my fingers were my toes, exactly. I don't want to jam them into that extension because then you're like, when you're squatting, you're not squatting with your toes like that, right? So that's kind of the issue when people use plates, when they try to like elevate, even like Arnold, right? When he's elevating his feet on those platforms there, it's like, you're basically now just putting your toes into that massive extension pattern. Whereas when we're using a wedge, we want to still mimic normal squatting as much as possible. We're just bringing the ground up to you. So when you see somebody use a squat normally without a wedge, when they get down to really deep depth, what do? their heels start to come up a little bit, right? So all we're doing is just feeding the ground into their feet so that can go up the chain into the brain. They get that good sensory feedback. And for beginners especially, just having that little bit of a, I mean, I've talked to my clients all the time. I'm like, hey, like, what do you like about this wedge? Because I still do about like 25 sessions a week. So I'm still using this with people all the time. And it's nothing about like, oh, my knees can go further over my toes. It's always, I feel more stable. I feel more balanced. And that's a thing that a lot of people lose sight on like social media, is they try to get so technical sometimes with products and so research heavy about it. And at the end of the day, it's like, it just makes people feel safer. And when people feel safer, they can perform better. So that's like another great side of it, is it just makes you feel safer when you're squatting, especially when it comes to a single leg work. I mean, when you're doing like a pistol squat, right? When you're doing a single leg squat, I know I can't do it. I need like a counterbalance in front of me. I mean, how many people can squat down on one leg without their heel coming up, right? So just having that elevation there allows you to perform the movement safely, and it can help reduce injury, because when you're squatting, you're rising up on your toes without anything underneath you. You're definitely not balanced properly. So that's kind of where I really see its main benefit, is providing safety, stability, and just feeding good technique.
And also, like, you know, especially if you are an athlete, you're going to find yourself in positions where, well, first of all, it's impossible to create the angles you need on a court or field without the knee going over the toe. So that myth has been debunked. You know, that whole thing of, we got into this phase for a long time where everyone was trying to keep their shins vertical on all lower body, because people had pain in their knee. So it is initially, it's a way to go more vertical shin. Imagine this is my shin, so that you put more hip stress, more glute ham stress, because people tend to be weak there from all the sitting. So it serves its purpose, but then in the end, it made our knees and quads weak, or it at least didn't train them in the same way we were training the glutes and the hamstrings. So the goal is eventually to get more of that, this is my knee, that more forward knee angle. But again, if the ankle can't flex, you know, you run into the situation where you try to squat down and you almost fall back, right? So you can use things. That's why we squat with the goblet style or front loaded. That's one way to help get deeper and taller. And that's why, like, what I recommend for people, you know, start using this with your body weight or a light, maybe 25 to 50 pound dumbbell based on your size for counterbalance. That 1-2 combo is the best way to kind of clean up your squat pretty quick.
Yeah, I agree. And back to the thing you said a while ago, I forgot to mention, is like, improving your dorsiflexion, the ability for your knee to go over your toe, is really hard to do. And it takes a lot of time. And I do think with Instagram nowadays, people just go on there and everyone's like, improve your ankle mobility in these 3 exercises. It's not that easy. You said it, 2 decades. It takes a really long time to do that. And I work with a lot of busy professionals, and our product is designed for busy professionals, general population, people who just want to really get in the gym and be able to exercise without limitations at an affordable cost, right? A lot of people, including myself, I don't have time to just be doing ankle mobility drills all the time. I mean, I'm perfectly fine just throwing a wedge under my foot, squatting, and then later on, I'll just do split squats without a wedge, or I'll do split squats with a wedge. And what I found too is that by getting the quad stronger, by getting the glutes stronger and the hamstring stronger in other exercises, and also getting like your anterior tibialis, your shin muscles stronger, you can improve ankle mobility still without having to squat barefoot though as well. Like if your ankle mobility is severely restricted, you can still squat with a wedge and then work on it outside of it without doing stretching drills though. So I think sometimes people think like, oh, if you use a wedge, you're going to be limited your whole life basically, like to the wedge. It's not always the answer. It's not as simple as that. So I think sometimes people, they overthink it a little too much. I think it's a lot of times it's just like, just put a wedge under your foot, you'll be able to squat deeper, and then go do some split squats without a wedge, and then go do some split squats with a wedge. Like, mix it up, but don't just think like, oh, I have to do these ankle mobility drills, I have to squat barefoot in order to be so-called healthy and fit, even though it's just like a made-up rule anyway of you have to squat barefoot. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, whoever really thought that just squatting barefoot with a barbell on your back dictates that you are strong and healthy.
You know, that's there's a lot to add to that. You know, one, another thing too is, you know, you can block the heels or elevate the heels. You use a weight in front for counterbalance. And then you also do more single leg training because, you know, a lot of things what's happening, people have pelvic asymmetry, some tilting, turning, or they have a weak side, strong side. There's imbalances in strength and mobility. So, and you get to overload your legs with no spinal stress. I mean, most people can't do 10 to 20 body weight split squats properly.
Oh, no,
you know,
not at all.
And in the beginning, like that's a goal. Like, can I get to 10 to 20 with just body weights? Whereas they want to worry about loading up their back on two legs because of the ego and the look and all that stuff. But I've always treated, you know, since all the mistakes I made powerlifting when I was young and all the injuries, I've since looked at double leg squatting as more of a higher rep endurance exercise. And I approach my strength work single legged because, you know, I train from home, my clients do. And, you know, with not much weights, you know, I got a 100-pound dumbbell, a pair of 50s and a pair of 25s. And I mean, I'm not even talking about single leg squats, right? Like, I you know, like you said, I'm working on that with my body weight now. I had done them before, but I'm trying to do them again a decade later now with all the improvements I've made. Because like you said, mobility is a long-term journey. And men in particular, we're very stiff. It has to do with a lot of things, maybe because of having more muscle and hormones. We're just stiffer people. I know my hips tighten up really quick, my ankles, and we all have injury histories, right? So a lot of athletes that sprained their ankles and never rehabilitated them, they never got the range of motion back. Those babies stiffened up to the point where this is like going to be a multi-plus year journey to get, you know, I've seen some of the goals of how much your ankle should bend, and it makes me want to cry because after all the work I've done, I still have a way to go. But the other thing I wanted to touch on too is in terms of the split squatting, like you can also use these for split squats. You can elevate the front heel to get more quad stress. I've even played around with putting the toes on the back end of this.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is I get more push off on the back leg. So talk more about like the unique, and like you said too, it extends the range of motion for hip thrusts, for split squats when you elevate. But talk about some of the exercises, like the unique ones you found. I was really pleasantly pleased with the hip thrust because, again, like you get more flexion through the hip, and I really like the pushing off of the toes.
Yes, I want to talk about one more benefit that I forgot to mention, and what we just talked about before was loading the spine. So definitely with the heel wedges we talked about, hit it over and over again. It helps you improve squat depth. But when you also elevate the heel too, it keeps the torso more upright. So one of the benefits is if you do like the barbell back squat, a lot of times people will lean forward excessively, and that can put a little bit of wear and tear on the spine there. So by elevating the heels, it keeps that torso more upright, so you're not loading the lower back as much. You can put more of that load on the legs. And so with that in mind, I kind of took that idea, and one of the favorite exercises I love doing with it are heel elevated deadlifts. So I like to elevate my heels on my wedges, and then with a hex bar, grab the hex bar and perform some deadlifts. And yet, like technically, it's not so much a deadlift anymore because you're not pulling your butt back as much. But just to keep it simple, you're picking something up off the ground. I call that a deadlift, right? So that's one of my favorite exercises because now you're staying way more upright. A lot of people with deadlifts, they're afraid to bend over as much because they feel like they're going to load their lower back too much. And it could just be a psychological thing. So by elevating the heels, we load up those quads and glutes, and it's a fantastic exercise. You can do it with dumbbells as well. So it's a great way to kind of overload it because when it comes to dumbbells and you're trying to do some heel elevated work, if you only have dumbbells at home, if you're trying to do front squats with dumbbells, holding it up here, you have to have a lot of upper body strength to be able to maintain that position. And your upper body could be limiting your ability to target your legs. So just holding them at your sides, maybe get some grips or something or some straps, that could help you tremendously to be able to load the legs more versus like a front squat or even a goblet squat. Because with a goblet squat, you can do a 100-pound goblet squat and that's about it. Like for most people, just because it's hard to hold a 100-pounder there. But a lot of people can easily, most people can easily hold like a 50-pounder in each hand. Most people who work out, right? Most males, I would say. And of course, some females. So that's one of my favorites is just elevating the heels for deadlifts. And then I do really like, I call it the deficit split squat. So you can give this one a try, is where you elevate the back foot on the wedge, and then you also elevate the front foot on the wedge too. So you have both feet elevated. So what I like about that is when you're elevating the rear foot, when you do that on like a bench or something, I don't know if I'm the only one, but when I'm doing like rear foot elevated split squats and I have my foot on a bench, like my toes sometimes, they'll like cramp up or something.
Yeah.
It's just not comfortable. And so with this, yeah, it's not nearly as high. Like I said, it's about 4 inches, 3.7 inches high, but you don't really need a ton of height for a rear foot elevated split squat. So what I found is like when I do put my foot up here, I can get extra depth in it. And if I elevate the front foot on top of it, now there's more than enough range of motion to go, and I'm not getting that cramping in my toes at all. It's way more comfortable. So that's one of my favorites. And we can, have all the listeners give that one a try. Elevate the back foot, elevate the front foot. Do 20 reps first without weight.
100%.
And then add some weight to it. So those are probably some of my favorites. Heel elevated deadlift, the deficit split squat with both feet elevated. And then I like the single leg hip thrust a lot as well with the forefoot elevated.
To your last point too about the split squat, so, and I feel like I taught it wrong in the past, in the sense that I looked at the split squat as a single leg exercise when it's a double leg exercise. Like technically the weight distribution should be pretty even, maybe 60% front leg, 40% back leg. But I did so much Bulgarian split squatting for a while with that higher elevation that my back leg got weak. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I wasn't loading the back leg as much. And I particularly, as someone with a history of knee pain, my knees would bother me most, the back leg knee, like when it would lower. So the great thing about being able to just elevate slightly and kind of put your toes under that stretch is that it really helps you strengthen the back knee and get that leg more involved in the split squat. Nothing wrong with doing Bulgarian split squats. I will say people elevate way too high, which forces them into a bad position where they kind of hyperextend their back and things get kind of ugly. But you won't want to elevate any higher than pretty much the depth you would use for a box squat, for those looking to adjust that. But it's in the category of rear foot elevated split squats. You can elevate high, you can elevate low. My preference is to elevate low because it still strengthens the back leg. You're less likely to mess up than you will because Bulgarian, like, you have to have the perfect height. A lot of those like single leg squat stands, the lowest setting is too high for people.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Like you said, people get in a really bad position. I mean, most people, technically speaking, you only really have like 10 degrees to pull your knee past your hip backwards. Most people do not have a lot of range of motion right there. Like what they do is they'll get up like on an 18-inch bench or something, like their hips, their pelvis will dump forward, their lower back will arch a ton. And it's like, that's just not a good position to be in, because you always want to be in a good position where your ribs are stacked above your pelvis. And that's kind of, I noticed, I'm like, okay, we really don't need to elevate much. Like a little bit of elevation goes a long way in kind of loading it. And when you do load the front leg too, that will kind of push you back a little bit to really load that back leg. So when you are doing some like front foot elevated work, so what I've done before is sometimes you can put a plate underneath the wedge, just if you want to get a little bit more front foot elevation. But even without it, you are, like I said, 3.7 inches up there in elevation. So when you're doing that front foot elevated split squat, that back leg will be on fire. And I think what a lot of people kind of make the mistake sometimes is they don't rest long enough between legs. They'll do like their left leg forward, finish the set, and then switch right away. And I always tell people, like, rest at least 30 seconds. Like, I understand you probably don't have 2 minutes to rest because of your schedule, but you got to like shake it out a little bit, move around, because if you just switch right into it, that other leg's already been pretty tired from getting worked, and you're not going to be able to get the same amount of work done on the other side.
For sure. I mean, again, like, unless the goal was like a metabolic body weight finisher and you're doing 30 seconds each leg for 5 minutes. But if the goal is load and performance, you want at least about 30 to 60 seconds between legs, 30 to 60. Unless you're doing like, and even then, if you're doing true true single leg work, like single leg box squats or levitating lunges where that back knee is floating as you come down. Some people call them shrimp squats or true pistol squats. Systemically, single-sided training is so taxing. The balance, I mean, the nervous system gets wiped. So you do want to have a mindset with rest. One interesting point you made too. So if I'm elevating the front foot, it extends the range of motion for the lead leg. So I'm getting more flexion through the hip, which can stress the glute more, but it actually kind of pushes you back a bit. So you said also the back toe or foot leg gets more involved.
Yeah.
And then if you elevate the back leg only, that kind of shifts you forward more to stress the lead leg more. If you elevate both, like you said, your deficit, now you're extending the range of motion on both, and you're stressing quad more lead leg, and honestly quad more trail leg too.
Yeah,
they're kind of like sprinter positions.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're stressing both, and you've improved that range of motion drastically. When doing a split squat, like every inch counts pretty much. Like when you like,
that's what my wife tells me.
When you're doing like one thing I make people do a lot is an isometric deficit split squat hold. So before getting them to try to do like 20 reps, we'll be like, hey, elevate the back leg, elevate the front leg. Let's see if we can hold this for 30 seconds. And I want you to go all the way down as low as you can right before that lower back starts to round. So I know we're keeping the position still in their hips. And that just sparked an idea to me. That's another thing when it comes to heel elevated squatting that people don't talk about. So many people talk about they can squat all the way down to the ground without their heels elevated. And then you see them squat, and as they get lower, you just see their butt wink and their lower back round the whole time. So it's important people understand that just because you're getting from A to B, it doesn't necessarily mean you're using the correct muscles to get there. Your body's always going to find the easiest way to get there. And the lower back rounding while squatting to depth is the most common cause you see amongst people. So by elevating the heels, you actually allow yourself to squat deeper, keeping the load on the legs and the hips. And that same thing is kind of going with split squats as well. Not so much, because for single leg work, you don't need as much mobility. You have a little bit more leeway there. But again, it's just the idea that we want to be able to load the legs. So for me and my clients' goals, I want to be able to load my clients' legs as much as possible and try to keep the lower back out of it. And I think the wedge is a really viable option to do that. And one superset I love, since we're talking about exercises before, and single leg training, is to do like a pistol squat, to do that like a skater squat version where the back leg's floating. I think you had called it something else as well. And then to go from there, don't switch legs, keep the same leg, and then go do a single leg hip thrust. So it's like you work heel elevated first, and then go work the other leg in a hip thrust variation, or do your single leg heel elevated first, go work the other leg with some calf work, and kind of supersetting it in that aspect. So what I love about the calf variation of it is doing the calf with the forefoot elevated is you're going to fatigue the calf out a ton, so that when you do get back to doing the single leg squat pattern, it should be a little bit easier now for the knee to go over the toe, because sometimes the knee can't get over the toe just because the calf is so tight and it's inhibiting anything to move. So if you fatigue that muscle out, it can stretch a little bit easier. So I love those two supersets. Super simple, but you get a lot of money back.
Yeah, single leg stacks are great. I love a lot of times I'll do hip thrusts before I go to split squats to kind of pre-fatigue the glutes to make the quads work harder. We've done that. We do a lot of these metabolic bodybuilding stacks for my advanced muscle heads, sophisticated meatheads, we call them, right? Because we're still finding ways to train hard but make lightweight feel heavy, make light loads go a longer way. But in the case of, because we want to give some applications for people too, you do a set of heels elevated squats, and then in between sets, stretch your calves. So by the time you get to the third, fourth, fifth set, because the calves take a long time to loosen up. Again, these are very dense fibers. You're on your feet all day, but you can notice improvements. Like by the time you get to the fifth set, you're getting a lot of motion in the ankle. There's a lot of blood to the joints, and that way you're not just sitting on your ass resting. You're working on the ankle dorsiflexion while you're bypassing the limitations, working the heels elevated squat. So, these are smart strategies to start using. Some people call it a filler. But I think the biggest thing we touched on here is, this industry is filled with absolutists, don't do this. Knee should never go over the toe, or shin should always be vertical, or never squat heels elevated, or if you can't squat with a barbell on your back or overhead, you're not mobile. Well, everyone's different. I think a case-by-case approach is really what we're looking for. And again, we kind of need standards to give people. People need to know, like, I've seen some people say never only try to achieve 90-degree angles in your joints and never go further.
That's a good one.
And then I see some, like, it's not a pull-up unless your chest touches the bar, when some people's chests, based on the length of their arm, if they don't have a big chest, like some people's chests are not going to be able to touch the bar. So, like I try to tell people, try to get the elbows tight to the ribs on a pull-up. That typically you'll find your good end range. With squatting, like you said, hip anatomy, limb length, injury history, etc. But if you're going ass to, that's another standard. If it's not ass to grass now, it's not a squat. But most people can't get there without elevating the heels, or what he meant by butt wink, for those that aren't familiar with that, it just means that you're you're tucking your tailbone, and since your pelvis attaches to your lumbar spine, if your pelvis tucks, you round out your lumbar spine, and now you're risking, especially like with body weight, a self-assisted with a TRX holding onto a pole, no big deal. But when you got a lot of weight in your back, you're putting all that compressive force into your spine and just trying to push out those discs. And they will lead to some protrusions or some herniations of the discs long term. So you squat to a depth that is functional, that allows you to maintain that good neutral spine position, meaning there's a slight arc in your lower back, but you're not ever tucking or rounding. And it's different for everyone. And there's tools accessible to us to work around while we try to fix some things. And if we can't all the way fix it, at least we know there's a way to kind of get people in the right position. But like you're talking about NBA players, like to put a barbell on some of these NBA guys' back at any point, it's malpractice, and especially especially when people want to put the bar in their back. Like I would not look at this as a way to go heavy on your squat. And like you said, like you want to start with slow eccentrics or lowerings, some good isometric pauses at depth to build the stability and fortify the joint structures before really going fast. And then, how much weight? What's the weight limitation on the XL?
So when it comes to the XL wedge, it's made out of high density EVA foam. What the cool thing about EVA foam is, anytime you push into it, it'll bounce back to its structure. So we had one guy, at first I was just telling people 500 pounds max load on this. Because like
including body weights?
Yeah, including body weight. Yeah.
Okay.
So just 500 pounds max, because I was like, the purpose of this isn't to load a ton with our foam wedges. This was more for single leg work, goblet squats, double barbell. And even still, for a 200-pound person, you got to be squatting 315 or something. And that's still a lot of weight for most people. But we did have a user who was a power lifter. He tested it. He's about 200 pounds, and he had 415 on his back. And he was using these, and they were perfectly fine. There's really no weight limit. I would say like 750 pounds probably, because when you feel it, it's just foam on top of foam on top of foam. So it can't break. Like when you're using the product, if you're loading it with a ton, after you get done with it, you'll see there's a little bit of indentation. But then if you wait like 10, 30 minutes, all of a sudden it's back to normal again. So I wouldn't really say there's a weight limit to it, but it's definitely designed more for that moderate loading. And then if you really want to go super, super heavy, we do have like our rubber wedges that we built that are a little bit heavier duty. But, I would say probably anywhere from like that 600 to 750 pounds it can hold. So, it's I mean, you feel it's strong. It is. And again, like,
it pains me too, just to hear someone like, that person squatting 400 pounds on these, maybe they can, but if they can't do 20 split squats on each leg and they're doing that, it's just, that's the thing, we have to get to the point. We got to be smart about our training. Start playing with tempo, start slowing down the repetition speed. one of the things that I had a lot of our people do, and I shared this with you, I shared it on social too, is because I looked at some of this knees over toe stuff. It had always been problematic for me. And I even used some of the regressions and because of the history of cartilage and articular, cartilage damage in my knees, both knees actually swelled up. So what I started doing was I did I put the slant boards against the wall like this, put my feet on relatively close stance, and I would keep my trunk completely upright against the wall. And I would go slide down for 5 seconds, hold for 5 seconds at end range. I'd find the point where, I was right above the gray zone where if I went maybe a little bit lower, the knee might hurt a little bit or just be a little strained. I'd stay above that, hold for 5. Because with ISOs, you build strength 15 degrees above and below. So you don't even have to get to that end range just by being within that range. And then I would come back up. So 5 seconds down, 5-second hold, 10 reps of that, man. Like, it's really, I've noticed actual gains in my VMO or teardrop quad, low inner quad. And now my knees are more comfortable going forward. And again, I think one thing people overlook too is part of why the sled is so good is that because the sled, you can lean against it. Like, you could say, well, a football player needs to get on their toes and the knee has to go over the toe when they get as a lineman. But the thing is, they're pushing against someone as you would be pushing a sled. So you get the angle you need and the counterbalance you need to get to those angles. And when you push the sled forward, and ideally when you pull it backwards, the knee should be coming over the toe. And it's fine because you're pushing something and leaning. But it's almost like the same inclination you would have if you had a slant board there. So actually, I like to even try. You can even do like some people call them Tyson push-ups because Tyson used to do them apparently. But blast-off push-ups where I'll put my feet against the wall and I'll basically push, go from it's like you're in a push-up position, but you end up in a squat and then you push forward to the bottom of the push-up and back. And you can get that kind of sprinter out of the block scenario as well. But that's the thing. It's like, be smart with your training. Don't get these and look, how heavy can I squat now? How low can I go now? No, start with your body weight or a lightweight for counterbalance. Take at least 35 seconds to go down, pause for at least 1 or 2 seconds at the bottom and keep strict with that. And if you don't find a challenge, then you must be a freak show because do you want to stress your joints or do you want to stress your muscles? That's the question you have to ask people when they train. A lot of bros who want to throw heavyweight around and never evolve their training, they're just going to turn their joints into dust. And then they have no knowledge of what to do when the joint is done. When the life cycle of that joint is done, you replace it. And then what are you going to do? You've got no exit strategy or sustainability.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget about isometrics and how good isometrics are and like the progression of it. It's not an absolute rule by any means, but it's always a good understanding of like, if you can't sit in a position for 30 seconds, you probably shouldn't be loading it a ton. Like, get really comfortable there, especially with like split squats, like an isometric split squat. I still think that's one of the best exercises people can do for knee health. And even still, when it comes to the knees over toes stuff, I do think a lot of people, it's just our culture nowadays. It was where everybody just jumps all in, and it's kind of like this all or nothing mindset. So it's this idea of like knees over toes for everything, stretch the knees as much as possible, stretch the knees at the hip and the knee joint. I mean, I saw this horrendous video where this guy was doing kind of like a reverse Nordic, or maybe it was, I guess it's like his feet were locked in and his hips were extended and he was falling backwards at the plate on his chest. So it's like a sissy squat.
He was on his feet or he was kneeling?
He was on his feet and he had his legs locked in.
Oh, okay. So yeah, they call that the sissy squat. And that's not, by the way, don't take offense to anyone listening. That's just what it's called. For some reason, I don't know why they call it that, but it is. Yeah.
And he was leaning backwards, so his hips were extended and he was stretching the knee joint, and he had a 45-pound plate on him, and his ACL just snapped. In the video. And that's just the point of, there is too much of something. Like, you really have to build up very, very slowly. And when it comes to doing knees over toes, it's a very, very slow process. So don't rush it when you're using these wedges. I always tell people too, if you do feel knee discomfort while using it, what that means is either walk down the wedge a little bit so you're not at a super high elevation, you'll reduce that forward knee translation, or just stop pushing your knees forward. There's nothing wrong with using a heel wedge and just squatting like you normally do. You don't always have to get on a wedge and push your knees as far forward as possible. Like we talked about earlier, sometimes just having something on your heels just makes you feel safer and it gives you that feeling of more balance. Just squat how you normally squat. And then as you get better, start to maybe push the knees a little bit forward so you then can load the knee joint more. But it should be a step-by-step process. Even doing wall sits with heels elevated, like hold that position for 30 seconds and just watch how much your legs will be shaking, because an isometric is a long held stretch and just like pretty much the hardest part of the movement. So if you are somebody who is super tight, isometrics are a great place to start to kind of restore those ranges of motion in it. And then one thing I wanted to mention was back to when we were talking about it, like those filler movements, when we were talking about doing like squats followed by a calf raise movement. One of my favorite things to do is you do like your goblet squats or your barbell front squats or something, or even your split squats. And then to recover, you sit down and then you set up the wedges directly underneath you, and you can grab some dumbbells, put them right on your quads, and do some seated calf raises. So when we bend the knee for calf raises, it's going to train the lower calf to soleus a little bit more than the gastroc. So that's one of my favorite filler moves right there. And we know too, is like when you do train the soleus, it does translate a little bit more into ankle mobility, because that gastroc, it ties into the hamstring so much that I just think of the calf and the hamstring, like the upper calf muscle and the hamstring, pretty much as just one knee flexor. I feel like it definitely plays a role into that, because when you're doing leg curls, your calves can get pretty sore, like that upper calf muscle, right?
Oh yeah,
so there's a big
especially
difference.
based on the toe position.
Mm-hmm.
So if you plantar flex while you do it, you get a ton, right? So plantar flex pushing away, but if you pull the toes back, the gastroc is still going to probably assist, but it's not. It's kind of
as
insufficient.
Much.
Yeah,
mm-hmm. But I think that's a thing though, right? It's like a lot of people, they just see the calf as just one calf muscle and they're only doing standing calf work. Yet you have to throw in some bent knee calf work, and that will do wonders for your knee health. It's not just about the thighs and the anterior tibialis when it comes to the knee. You can't forget about the calf. The calf and the hamstrings play a vital role in keeping your knees healthy. So I can't recommend enough throwing in simple calf raise work, maybe 2 sets by 20 to 30 reps standing, 2 sets, 20 to 30 reps seated. Do that maybe once a week, and you'll see huge improvements in potentially your ankle mobility and overall knee health.
A couple things to add to that. Number one, you've also got a TIB bar that's plate loaded that you can actually work on. Because again, you can do ankle mobility exercises until you're blue in the face, but unless you actively strengthen the shins, which actually that's what actually pulls you into dorsiflexion. Like really good squatters, they have a mastery of the descent, not coming up. They're actually able to use their hip flexors and their shin muscles to pull themselves down. This gets particularly important when you want to do pistol squats, because otherwise you're just trying to like sink against gravity. You're going to fall back and not have the muscular strength needed to translate forward for counterbalance. The next point is too, people, they overlook the benefit of just like ramping up range of motion within a set. You start the first rep, come to whatever depth is comfortable, come back up. Second rep, see if you can get a little bit lower. By rep 10, you might actually get the range of motion you're looking for. And again, you can use these for warm-ups. You can use them for cool downs or back off sets. And then from set to set, you might notice more range of motion. But what will happen, people that jump on this right away, if their ankles are the stiffest, even when you're elevated with this, if your ankles are stiffer than your hip and knee, you're not going to get the knee very forward here because your body will go to the least area of stiffness. So your hips and knees can move well. You really can't really get the knee too far forward on this if your ankles are stiff.
Yeah, and I think some people, when they talk about the knees going over the toes and using a heel elevated wedge, I think people sometimes think that when you're using the wedge, you have to drive your knees as far forward as possible. And like we talked about earlier, it's just not the case. put the wedge under your heel and squat normally. I think another thing too is when it comes to squatting well, a lot of times people think about having like these huge arches, because that's kind of in the powerlifting realm of having massive arches whenever you squat, like kind of find that tripod of the foot, like find the big toe, find the pinky, and find the heel, and then just maintain that rigid position the whole time. But my belief is that when we are squatting, we kind of want to start in that arch position, but then as we squat, we kind of have to have our feet flatten out a little bit in order for the knee to actually go over the toe. So I found that when you're using the wedge and you're elevating the heel, it kind of helps to give you that natural arch. And then it makes it a lot easier for the heel, for the foot itself to drop. And when that foot drops, it allows the knee to actually move further over to unlock some ankle mobility. So sometimes ankle mobility, it's not always just the calf or the shin. Sometimes it's just you have really tight feet and you're not allowing your foot to actually pronate, which is when the arch drops a little bit and the foot flattens out. And, if you look at most people, all the shoes they wear are very narrow and very tight. So a lot of times people's ankle mobility is kind of limited due to a foot just being super narrow and not being able to get out of that arch position.
That's a great point too. And it actually reminds me, some of my favorite drills with this are, we talked about the benefit of isometrics. So like if you can't do a plank for at least a minute, you're not going to master the push-up. You can't hang from a bar for a minute, you're not going to master a pull-up. If you can't balance on one leg for a minute, single leg squatting, it's just not going to happen, right? So these are the kind of entry-level prerequisites or standards. But I've been doing heels elevated single leg balance work, toes elevated single leg balance work. I even put this on the side, and if this is my foot and this is the knuckle of my big toe, I'll do the balance like this. And what I notice it forces me to do is be more actively pushing down in with my big toe. So
interesting.
I don't know if you've tried that before, but man, like I was like, wow, this is really corrective for me, because I'm someone who is prone to rolling out on the outer sole of my foot.
Okay.
Because I can't get, like you said, a lot of my ankle mobility is from stiffness in the feet from wearing those, wearing Jordans and really tight structured shoes or squat shoes. And by forcing me to kind of push in with the big toe, I actually can create a stronger arc. And I feel the stretching happening through the arc of the foot too. So I'll make some video of this coming soon, but I wanted to share that with you because I was like, wow, this is really, like when I balance on one leg, heel elevated, it puts a little bit more pressure on my toes to kind of prevent me from kind of sliding off the board. And if I do it with toes elevated, I get this massive like stretch in my calf and ankle. But coming on the side was really interesting. I was like, wow, this is an amazing way to stress the arc of the foot and get some mobility for the foot too. But I mean, look, there's so many applications. We'll have the link to check out the site, including all the wedge options, the TIB bar to train the anterior tibialis or shin muscles, and also improve ankle mobility, prevent shin splints, and in the description for the video or the audio podcast. But what are some of your final thoughts? Like, you have a big picture for where you want to take the company?
So the big picture of what we want to do down the line is, each wedge has, except for their atomic wedges, but it's on a thank you card. Each one has a QR code on it. And when you scan that QR code, it takes you to our link tree. And that kind of gives you a bunch of options of tutorials, exercises, workout programs. Like right now I use Train Heroic to host all of our workout programs. When you sign up for the newsletter, you get a free 90-day workout program, 3-month program. And that's kind of where I want to take the company, is using my expertise as a trainer. Like I said, I've been in the industry for 10 years now, and kind of just giving out really good workout programs and follow along workout routines for free or for very, very affordable. Right now we have a training group on Train Heroic for $10 a month. You get your own training app. You get access to video tutorials and a full workout program delivered right to your phone. 3 total body workouts a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, with a cardio option on Saturday. So we do that for $10 a month right now. When you buy the product, like I said, you scan the QR code, you click start here. It brings you to a web page where I shot 14 follow along workout videos of me using the wedges with just like dumbbells and some body weight movements. So that's also there too. Each workout's like 20 to 30 minutes, and that's follow along style, which I love doing. So I kind of want to get back to that more. I want to start shooting more content of me using the product, teaching people, talking to them, and trying to motivate people, try to give people some inspiration, and just try to deliver so much value that when people spend $30 on this, they feel it was like the best purchase of their life for $30. So I would say that's the big mission, is educate people more with exercises and motivate them and inspire them to get back out there. And ultimately, we want to give everybody in the world a wedgie. That's what we're trying to do.
I love pulling it out, man. It feels great. Look, I only like stuff that's legit. Over the years, I've passed over many income opportunities to promote something that was garbage. If I don't use it or believe in it, I'm not going to promote it. People that listen to me know that. I've already gotten a lot of people that are my Gorilla Corn members, you know, they always jump on things first. But whether you're a Gorilla Corn or a member of my Express program at thedailybj.com, we're going to be using these slant boards. And it's what I use in my videos. I highly recommend it. The link is in the description of the audio podcast or the video podcast. I also, when we initially spoke, because, you know, I got these, I'm like, oh, man, this is a great product. And I learned more about you and your background. Like, look, you know what you're talking about, man. You're one of the, you're the type of person we want in this industry that really cares deeply about what they do. And it's not just about making money. It's about getting people what they need, helping them improve, and being kind of a steward of good fitness for the world. That might sound corny or cliche, but that's important, man, because there are a lot of online marketers that don't feel the same way. And, you know, like, there's knockoffs on Amazon. If they are less expensive, not by much. This is a really affordable product. And I mean, you've arrived, but, you know, you're 30. I'm 40. Trust me. Like, I feel like I'm just getting started at 40. So, like, this is like your pre-career. And you're already doing great things, man. You have your own product. You're an entrepreneur, and you're impacting people daily, in person, online. I mean, it's a good place to be. So you should be proud of what you've accomplished so far. This is an excellent product. I've looked at a bunch of other slant board stuff, and the reason that you're on is because this is my favorite. And we've done some work together, but that's because, to me, it sells itself. And anybody that's gotten it so far is like a big fan of it. And I'm talking about people like Colin Ray, Kim, people that listen that are distance coaching clients that immediately got this. They love it for their training. So I can't recommend it enough. Where can people follow, learn more, or, you know, follow you? You're all over the socials. And again, I'll put the links in the descriptions.
Yeah. First, I want to say thank you so much for having me on. And I think I just reached out to you via Instagram. So I really appreciate you taking the time to write back to me. I've been a huge fan of yours for a while now. You definitely been a mentor in the industry. I've been following your work now for a while now. So it's super, super awesome to kind of see this come full circle. When it comes to the website, that's going to be squatwedges.com, Squat Wedges. And then our Instagram is going to be Squat Wedgiez. So at Squat Wedgiez, and that's a Z at the end. The reason why we didn't call it squatwedgies.com was for the SEO. I figured not many people will be looking up wedgies. So we decided to go to squatwedges.com.
One of the biggest mistakes I made in my career is I would make content like the bodyweight burners workout, but no one searches bodyweight burner. They search for bodyweight workout at home I can do in 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? So smart move on the SEO piece. Get with the program. Get these squat wedgies. Listen to Uncle Baby Biscuits. I'm always right, and if I'm wrong, well, I don't know if that's have I been wrong before. No, but trust me, this is an amazing product. I use it every day now. It's part of my home gym. It's part of my programming. And I think it should be for yours too. A 5-star rating review is much appreciated if you're listening on a typical podcast outlets, iTunes, Spotify, etc. And if you're on YouTube, please like, share, subscribe, and ask us any questions in the comments. And links will be in the description for both the audio and the video. Erik, thank you for your time. Keep doing great work. And when in doubt, get a wedgie, get a squat wedgie today. Peace.